Welcome to this journey through the last unexplored frontier on our planet, a realm more alien than the surface of Mars. Tell us where you're watching from now, because this story will move you in a way few other accounts can, revealing that the greatest mysteries of our world don't exist in distant galaxies, but in crushing darkness beneath our own oceans. We're about to delve into a mystery that encompasses 71% of Earth's surface, where scientists have mapped more of the moon than the seafloor beneath us, and where discoveries in the past decade have shattered everything we thought we knew about life itself. What lurks in the deepest trenches? What ancient creatures drift through waters that have remained unchanged for millions of years? And most disturbing of all, what inexplicable phenomena have been documented by those brave or foolish enough to descend into the abyss? It was the year 1960. The Cold War was escalating between superpowers, and humanity's gaze turned upward to the stars, obsessed with the space race. But on January 23rd of that year, something far more profound occurred in the opposite direction. Two men descended 7 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean's surface into the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth. And what they witnessed there would haunt the scientific community for decades to come. Lieutenant Don Walsh and Swiss engineer Jacques Piccard squeezed into a steel sphere barely larger than a Volkswagen Beetle, attached to a bathyscaphe called Trist, and began their descent into what some called inner space. The journey would take nearly 5 hours, dropping through layers of ocean that grew progressively darker, colder, and more hostile to human life with each passing fathom. But they weren't the first to attempt such depths, and they wouldn't be the last to encounter things that defied explanation. To understand what lies beneath, you must first understand the ocean itself, not as the pleasant blue expanse you see from a beach, but as a vertical world of distinct zones, each more alien than the last. The sunlight zone, the epipelagic, extends down to 660 feet. This is the ocean we think we know: dolphins leaping, fish schooling, light dancing through clear water. It's comfortable, familiar, deceptive. Below that begins the twilight zone, the mesopelagic, reaching down to 3,300 feet. Here, sunlight fades to a deep blue gloom. Creatures develop enormous eyes to capture the last photons of light. Others begin producing their own illumination, bioluminescence, turning themselves into living lanterns in the gathering darkness. The water temperature drops dramatically. Pressure increases with each foot of descent, adding 14.7 pounds per square inch. Your lungs would collapse, your bones would compress, but that's only the beginning. At 3,300 feet, you enter the midnight zone, the bathypelagic. Absolute darkness. No plant life can survive here, for photosynthesis is impossible without light. The temperature hovers just above freezing. The pressure reaches crushing levels that would instantly kill any surface creature. And yet, life persists, thrives even. This is where things become strange. In 1977, scientists exploring thermal vents in the Galapagos Rift made a discovery that rewrote biology textbooks. They found entire ecosystems thriving in the superheated, toxic water spewing from volcanic vents on the ocean floor. Ecosystems that didn't rely on sunlight for energy, but on chemosynthesis. Tube worms 8 feet long, eyeless shrimp clustering around vents that reached temperatures of 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Bacterial mats metabolizing hydrogen sulfide, a compound that would kill most surface life instantly. Life, it seemed, didn't need what we thought it needed. It adapted. It evolved in ways that seemed impossible. And if life could exist here, in conditions this extreme, what else might have evolved in the even deeper, unexplored regions? Dr. Robert Ballard, the oceanographer who discovered the wreck of the Titanic, once said something that sends chills through anyone who understands its implications. I'm hoping that sometime before I die, we'll be able to say we've looked at as much of the ocean as we've looked at the moon. As of today, we've explored less than 5% of our oceans. 5%. Imagine a house where you've only examined one room out of 20. Now imagine that house is filled with creatures that have evolved in complete isolation for millions of years, developing survival mechanisms and adaptations we can't begin to comprehend. Imagine that in some of those unexplored rooms, things move that shouldn't exist according to everything we know about biology, physics, and the limits of life itself. The ocean is that house, and we've barely opened the front door. Let's return to that January day in 1960, to Walsh and Pickard descending into Challenger Deep, the lowest point in the Mariana Trench. As they dropped through the water column, their descent was marked by a progression into pure alienness. The steel sphere groaned and creaked under increasing pressure that eventually reached over 16,000 pounds per square inch. One small flaw in the metal, one microscopic crack, and the sphere would implode in milliseconds, crushing them before their nerves could register the sensation. At 20,000 feet, they entered the Haddle Zone named after Hades, the Greek underworld. Few creatures from shallower waters can survive here. The adaptations required are too extreme, and yet, as they descended past 30,000 feet, their instruments registered movement in the water around them. Something was out there in the darkness, many somethings. At 5,760, 7 feet, nearly 7 miles below the surface, they reached the bottom. The floor of Challenger Deep, the lowest point on Earth. The lights of the tryst illuminated a landscape of fine sediment, almost like lunar dust. And there, in that impossible place where the pressure should have made complex life impossible, they saw something that shouldn't have existed. A flat fish, approximately a foot long, resembling a halley, butt or sole, lying on the bottom. It looked up at them, or at least they interpreted its movement that way, and then slowly swam away into the darkness. Life, at the deepest point on Earth, in conditions that should have been absolutely lethal. The scientific establishment initially questioned their report. Some still do, but Jacques Pickard was adamant about what they witnessed, describing it in multiple interviews over the following decades. "We saw this flatfish," he would say, "and it proved that life could exist at any depth in the ocean. But if life can exist there, what else might exist in the 95% of the ocean we haven't explored?" The question becomes more unsettling when you examine other documented encounters with the unknown in deep waters. In 1968, the United States Navy deployed submarines to search for the USS Scorpion, a nuclear submarine that had mysteriously vanished in the Atlantic Ocean. The search was conducted at depths exceeding 10,000 feet. During those operations, sonar operators reported anomalies they still can't explain: massive objects moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible at those depths, creating acoustic signatures unlike any known marine life or human technology. These reports were classified. Officially, they remain classified. But sailors who worked those operations have spoken, in whispers, in retirement, about what they detected on their screens. Shapes the size of aircraft carriers, they said, moving at over 100 knots through water where the pressure would crush a conventional submarine like a tin can. "We called them fast movers," one former sonar technician recounted in a 1997 interview, speaking on condition of anonymity. "They'd appear on sonar, track parallel to us for a while, then accelerate downward at angles that would snap any vessel in half, then they just vanish, disappear off the scope entirely. When pressed about what he thought they were, he went silent for a long moment. I've spent 30 years trying to convince myself they were equipment malfunctions. He finally said, "But I know what I saw on those screens. We all did, and none of us talk about it, because the moment you do, you sound insane. But are these reports truly insane? Or are they simply encounters with life forms or phenomena so far outside our understanding that we lack the framework to even begin classifying them? Consider the giant squid Archaeoteuthis ducks. For centuries, sailors reported encounters with massive, tentacled creatures that could drag entire vessels beneath the waves. Scientists dismissed these as myths, hallucinations, exaggerations born of too much rum and too many months at sea. Then, in 2004, Japanese researchers managed to photograph a living giant squid in its natural habitat for the first time. The creature measured over 40 feet long. Its eyes were the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes in the animal kingdom, evolved to capture bioluminescent light in the deep ocean darkness. Its tentacles were lined with serrated suckers that could grip prey with devastating force. The kraken was real. If giant squid creatures that grow to school bus length and hunt in the abyss were dismissed as myth until just 20 years ago, what else might be swimming through those unexplored depths? What else might be real? In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron descended to Challenger Deep in a specially designed submersible, becoming the third human ever to reach that depth and the first to do so solo. He spent 3 hours at the bottom, filming in high definition what Walsh and Pickard had only glimpsed through small portholes. His footage revealed a landscape even more alien than imagined. The sediment on the ocean floor at that depth is composed primarily of the remains of countless organisms that have drifted down from above over millions of years, a fine dust of death accumulating in eternal darkness. The water itself has a peculiar quality at those pressures, more viscous than normal seawater, almost gel-like in its movement. And the creatures. Cameron's cameras captured amphipods, tiny crustaceans, that had grown to sizes completely disproportionate to their shallow water cousins. Some measured over a foot long, their bodies translucent, their movements slow and deliberate in the dense water. Genetic analysis of specimens later revealed that these creatures had evolved in isolation for so long that they represented entirely new species unknown to science. But there was something else in Cameron's footage, something that caused considerable discussion among the scientists analyzing the video. At approximately 2 hours and 17 minutes into his dive, his cameras captured movement at the edge of the light pool cast by the submersible's floods. Something large displaced the sediment on the seafloor, creating a cloud that temporarily obscured the view. When the sediment settled, deep furrows were visible in the ocean floor, furrows that extended beyond the reach of his lights and disappeared into absolute darkness. Something had been there, something big enough to leave tracks in sediment 7 miles below the surface. Something that moved away from his lights, retreating into depths even greater than Challenger Deep itself. Because here's what most people don't understand. The Mariana Trench isn't the only deep place in the ocean. It's just the deepest we've measured. There are dozens of other trenches, chasms, and abyssal plains that plunge to depths barely explored. The Tonga Trench, the Philippine Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench, each one dropping miles beneath the surface. Each one harboring ecosystems and creatures we've barely begun to catalog. And then there are the underwater cave systems. In 2009, oceanographers discovered a massive network of underwater caves off the coast of the Bahamas, extending down to depths of over 600 feet. When divers finally entered these systems, they found something remarkable and deeply unsettling. The caves contained layers of ancient ocean water, isolated from the surface for potentially thousands of years, creating unique environments where evolution had taken distinctly different paths. The creatures found in these isolated pockets were wrong. That's the word one marine biologist used in her field notes. Not wrong in the sense of being malformed, but wrong in that they seem to represent evolutionary branches that shouldn't exist, crustaceans with extra appendages in configurations that served no apparent purpose, fish with sensory organs in impossible locations, bacterial mats that responded to light despite having existed in total darkness for millennia. It was like looking at an alternate timeline of evolution. Dr. Stephanie Schwabe, who led one expedition, later wrote, "As if these caves had become laboratories where life was experimenting with forms that the main ocean had long since abandoned." But the most disturbing discovery came from deepwater ROV operations in 2017, when researchers exploring a trench off the coast of Australia detected something on sonar that shouldn't exist: the Bloop. Actually, the Bloop had been detected much earlier in 1997, but it took 20 years of analysis and debate before scientists felt confident discussing it publicly. The sound was recorded by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration on hydrophones in the Pacific Ocean. It was an ultra-low frequency sound, rising rapidly in frequency over about 1 minute, detected by sensors over 3,000 miles apart. The sound profile matched that of a living creature, but the creature would have to be several times larger than the largest known animal on Earth, the blue whale. Scientists eventually attributed the Bloop to icequakes, glaciers, fracturing and creating seismic sounds that travel through water. That's the official explanation. It's neat, it's comfortable, it allows us to sleep at night. But some of the researchers who analyzed the original recordings aren't convinced. The frequency patterns, they quietly argue, contain modulations too complex for simple ice fracturing. The sound changed pitch in ways that suggested biological vocalization, communication, perhaps, or echolocation on a massive scale. If the Bloop was indeed a living creature, it would have been unimaginably large. Estimates based on the sound's characteristics suggest something potentially over 100 feet in length, with vocal organs powerful enough to generate sound waves that could be detected thousands of miles away. What could such a creature be? Where would it live? And most critically, what would it feed on to sustain a body that massive in the deep ocean, where food is scarce? The answer to that last question becomes particularly unsettling when you learn about the deep scattering layer. During World War II, sonar operators in the Pacific began detecting a mysterious layer in the ocean that seemed to rise toward the surface at night and descend during the day. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. The layer was too thick, too dense to be organic. It appeared on sonar as a false seafloor, sometimes 600 feet thick, existing at depths between 600 and 3,000 feet during the day. It wasn't a malfunction, it was biomass. The deep scattering layer, as it came to be known, consists of trillions upon trillions of small marine organisms, primarily lanternfish, squid, jellyfish, and krill, that migrate vertically through the water column each day in what may be the largest animal migration on Earth. They rise at night to feed in shallower waters, then descend during the day to avoid predators. The biomass of this layer is so enormous that we still can't accurately estimate it. Some calculations suggest it may contain more living tissue than all humans on Earth combined. And it exists in a zone we rarely explore, a zone where light begins to fail and pressure begins to crush. This layer represents an almost incomprehensible amount of food for anything large enough to feed on it. Anything with the adaptations to hunt in the twilight zone could sustain itself indefinitely on this daily migration of nutrients. Anything large enough, anything patient enough, anything evolved to wait in the darkness below. In 2021, something happened that brought all these disparate mysteries into sharp, disturbing focus. A research vessel operating in the Indian Ocean, the RSS Discovery, was conducting a routine bathymetric survey, essentially mapping the ocean floor using sonar, when their instruments detected an anomaly, a structure on the seafloor that didn't match any known geological formation. The initial readings suggested something massive, roughly circular, approximately 2 miles in diameter, at a depth of 14,000 feet. The sonar returns indicated geometric patterns too regular to be natural. Dr. Elena Martinez, the chief oceanographer aboard the Discovery, later described the moment they first saw the readings. "We thought it was a data error," she said in a carefully worded press release issued 6 months after the discovery. "We ran diagnostics, we recalibrated, we moved the ship and surveyed the area again from a different angle. The structure was still there, and it appeared to be organized, deliberately arranged." The Discovery deployed an autonomous underwater vehicle, an ROV equipped with high-definition cameras and powerful lights, to investigate. The descent took 4 hours. As the ROV approached the structure, the team aboard the ship crowded around the monitors in the control room, watching the feed in silence. What the cameras revealed defied immediate explanation. The structure wasn't a single object, but appeared to be a complex of formations rising from the seafloor. Some reached heights of over 100 feet. The surfaces showed patterns that resembled stonework, regular blocks, precise angles, surfaces too smooth to be natural erosion. Between these formations ran what appeared to be channels or passageways, extending into darkness beyond the reach of the ROV lights. "We're looking at architecture," one geologist whispered, his voice picked up by the control room's recording system. "That's not possible, that shouldn't be there," but it was there. As the ROV maneuvered through the structure, its cameras captured more details that only deepened the mystery. The blocks appeared to be made of a material unlike any known rock formation. Analysis of the video suggested a composition that was partially organic, as if the structure had been grown rather than built. Samples retrieved by the ROV manipulator arm later confirmed this unsettling hypothesis. The material contained complex proteins and mineral matrices that had no analog in terrestrial geology or biology. Something had created this structure. Something had organized these formations with clear purpose and design. And based on sediment dating of the samples, it had done so approximately 12,000 years ago, during the last ice age, when sea levels were over 300 feet lower, and this location might have been much closer to the surface, or possibly above it entirely. The implications were staggering. An advanced civilization operating in the deep ocean 12,000 years ago, a species that evolved to build in conditions that would kill humans instantly, or something else, something that defied conventional classification entirely. The RSS Discovery spent 3 weeks surveying the structure, deploying the ROV repeatedly to different sections. They discovered more anomalies with each dive, chambers that appeared hollow, though the ROV couldn't penetrate deeply enough to explore them fully. Surfaces covered in patterns that some team members insisted looked like writing, though no linguist could identify the script or even confirm it was language. And most disturbing of all evidence, that something still inhabited the structure. On the 7th ROV dive, at a depth of 14,200 feet, the cameras captured movement in one of the passageways. Something large displaced water at the edge of the light pool, creating turbulence that rocked the ROV on its tether. The cameras swung toward the disturbance, but whatever had been there retreated faster than the lights could track. For 3 full seconds, an eternity in situations like this, the camera captured a partial silhouette against the darkness. The shape was organic, clearly alive, but its form didn't match any known deep-sea creature. It appeared to have multiple appendages, not in any symmetrical arrangement, extending from a central body mass that the researchers later estimated at 15 to 20 feet in diameter. And then it was gone, vanishing into the structure's interior with a speed that shouldn't have been possible in water at that depth and pressure. The ROV continued recording for another 40 minutes, but the team aboard the Discovery was no longer focused on the structure itself. They were focused on the question that now consumed everyone on the ship. What was that? Doctor, Martinez ordered the ROV to return to the surface. The team spent the night analyzing the footage, running it through enhancement algorithms, consulting with marine biology experts via satellite link. No one could identify the creature. Some argued it might have been a large octopus. The species is known for intelligence and adaptability, but the movement patterns didn't match. Octopi move through water with fluid grace, propelling themselves with jets of water. This thing had moved with purpose, with coordinated appendage motion that suggested a very different form of locomotion. And there was something else on the recording that only became apparent after multiple viewings and audio enhancement. As the creature retreated, sensitive hydrophones on the ROV picked up low-frequency sounds emanating from the structure. Not the random noise of water movement or geological shifts, but organized pulses patterns that repeated with variations, like language. Like communication, the sounds were being analyzed when the expedition was abruptly terminated. On the morning of day 23 of the survey, Dr. Martinez received encrypted communications from multiple government agencies. The nature of those communications has never been publicly disclosed, but by that evening, the RSS Discovery was en route to the nearest port. The ROV footage was classified. The scientific team was required to sign non-disclosure agreements that legally prevented them from discussing most of what they'd observed. In the carefully sanitized press release issued 6 months later, the discovery was described as an unusual geological formation of significant scientific interest. The structure was noted. The organic materials were mentioned. The creature was not. But here's what makes this entire account even more disturbing. The RSS Discovery wasn't the first expedition to find such structures. In 1986, a Soviet submarine conducting classified operations in the Arctic Ocean reported discovering similar formations beneath the ice at depths exceeding 10,000 feet. The structures exhibited the same geometric patterns, the same organized arrangement, the same bizarre organic mineral composition. Soviet oceanographers who examined the submarine's sonar data later defected to the West, bringing with them reports that their government had been studying these formations for years, conducting expeditions that were kept secret even during the glasnost period of Soviet history. According to these defector reports, the Soviets had lost contact with at least 2 research submarines while investigating Arctic structures. One submarine was later found on the ocean floor, its hull crushed from the outside by what analysis suggested was enormous pressure applied at specific points, as if something had grabbed the vessel and squeezed. The other submarine was never recovered. And then there are the older accounts, much older. When researchers began seriously studying historical maritime records in the late 20th century, looking for patterns in ship disappearances and unusual sightings, they uncovered something that had been overlooked for centuries: a surprising number of ancient and medieval accounts describing encounters with cities beneath the waves, or palaces of the deep, that sailors claimed to see in clear water or during storms that churned up the ocean depths. Most historians had dismissed these as mythology variations of the Atlantis legend, sailor superstitions, hallucinations. But when the locations of these reported sightings were plotted on modern bathymetric maps, a disturbing pattern emerged. Many of them corresponded to areas where we now know deep oceanic trenches exist, areas that drop precipitously into the abyss. Ancient Roman texts describe sailors avoiding certain areas off the coast of Greece, where they reported seeing pillars of stone rising from the deep that moved when observed. Medieval Arabic manuscripts mention towers of the water demons in the Indian Ocean. Polynesian oral traditions speak of the first people who live in the darkness below the waves, and sometimes rise to watch the ship people pass. These accounts were separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, yet they described remarkably similar phenomena. And they all occurred in areas that modern surveys have revealed to be sites of extreme oceanic depth chasms and trenches where the seafloor drops away into lightless abysses. Were these ancient mariners observing the same structures we're only now beginning to discover with modern technology? Were they seeing the inhabitants of those structures during rare surface approaches? And if so, what else lives down there that we haven't yet encountered? The scientific community remains deeply divided on what these discoveries mean. Some researchers argue that the structures are entirely natural, unusual geological formations created by volcanic activity and undersea currents, formations that coincidentally resemble architecture, but have no actual artificial origin. The organic material, they suggest, is simply bacterial colonies and marine organisms that have colonized the rock surfaces over millennia. This is the safe interpretation, the comfortable one, the one that requires no fundamental revision of our understanding of Earth's history or the limits of life. But other scientists, generally speaking more quietly, more carefully, suggest that we may be confronting evidence of something unprecedented in human knowledge. They point to the regularity of the formations, the complexity of the organic materials, the patterns that resemble writing or communication. They note the similarities between structures found thousands of miles apart, suggesting either a common origin or a level of coordination that implies intelligence. And then there are the creatures, the unidentified organisms captured on camera, detected on sonar, reported by submersible pilots across decades of deep ocean exploration. Things that move through crushing pressures with apparent ease, things that are too large, too fast, too organized in their behavior to be simple deep sea life as we understand it. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a marine biologist who has spent 4 decades studying deep ocean ecosystems, put it bluntly in a 2019 lecture: "We've explored less than 5% of our oceans. We've identified perhaps 10% of the species that live in them, and now we're finding evidence of structures, of organized behavior, of intelligence operating in an environment considered too hostile for complex life. Either we've been catastrophically wrong about what's possible in the deep ocean, or we're confronting the existence of something that has evolved in parallel to everything we know, a separate biosphere, a separate evolutionary track, perhaps even a separate civilization that has existed in the depths while we built our societies on land." The implications of that statement are profound and unsettling. If intelligent life evolved in Earth's oceans, if something down there has been building, organizing, communicating for thousands or millions of years, Then we share this planet with another form of consciousness that has remained completely unknown to us until now. A consciousness that evolved under such alien conditions that it might be more difficult to communicate with than actual extraterrestrial intelligence. Because that's what the deep ocean truly is. An extraterrestrial environment that happens to exist on Earth. The pressure, the darkness, the temperature, the chemistry, it's as alien as the surface of Europa or Enceladus, the ice-covered moons of Jupiter and Saturn that scientists believe might harbor life in subsurface oceans. If we discovered the structures found in our own oceans on another planet, we would call them proof of extraterrestrial intelligence without hesitation. But because they're here, on Earth, in our oceans, we hesitate. We classify the evidence. We sign non-disclosure agreements. We suggest their geological formations and equipment malfunctions and tricks of light in the darkness. We do this because the alternative is too disturbing to accept. We are not alone on this planet. We never have been. And the others, whatever they are, have been down there the entire time, existing in a realm we couldn't even reach until the past few decades, watching as we finally developed the technology to descend into their domain. What do they think of us, these dwellers in the deep? What do they make of our clumsy submersibles and ROV, our bright lights that penetrate their eternal darkness? Are we, to them, like astronauts from another world descending to the surface of their planet? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what will happen as we continue to explore, to push deeper, to probe into regions where we may not be welcome? In 2023, China announced plans to construct a crewed submersible capable of reaching depths of 15,000 feet, deeper than the Challenger Deep. Russia has been quietly developing similar technology. The United States maintains several classified deep submergence programs. Commercial entities like Ocean Gate and others have expressed interest in deep ocean tourism and resource extraction. We are, in other words, preparing to go deeper, to stay longer, to establish a permanent presence in the abyss. And down there, in the crushing darkness, something is waiting, something that has built structures older than our oldest civilizations, something that moves through waters that would kill us instantly, something that may have been undisturbed for millions of years until we arrived with our submarines and cameras and lights. The ocean covers 71% of our planet. Most of it is over 2 miles deep. We've explored less than 5% of it. What's hiding in the other 95%? The story of the deep ocean remains an unfinished chapter in human knowledge, a reminder that the greatest mysteries on Earth aren't necessarily found by looking up at the stars, but by looking down into the dark waters that cover most of our world. But questions remain, and they grow more pressing with each passing year. How many structures like the one found by the RSS Discovery exist on the ocean floor? How many species of unimaginable strangeness swim through the uncharted trenches? And most critically, how will they react as we intrude deeper into their realm? To this day, governments maintain classified files on deep ocean anomalies. Submersible pilots speak in whispers about encounters with things they can't explain. Sonar operators report fast movers that shouldn't exist. Scientists analyze structures that shouldn't be there, couldn't be there, yet undeniably are. And on nights when research vessels drift above the deepest trenches, when hydrophones are lowered into the dark waters, strange sounds drift up from below. Organized pulses, complex frequencies, patterns that sound disturbingly like language, like communication, like something vast and ancient speaking to itself in the eternal night of the abyss. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are beginning to surface, and we may not be prepared for what we discover when we finally illuminate the deepest, darkest places on Earth. If this journey through the mysteries of the deep has moved you, if you find yourself staring at the ocean with new eyes and uncomfortable questions, then consider subscribing to this channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told, mysteries buried not just in time, but in places we've barely begun to explore: caves beneath mountains, ice cores preserving ancient secrets, forests where phenomena defy rational explanation. Leave a like if this account has provoked reflections that go beyond mere entertainment, if it's made you wonder what else might be hiding in the unexplored corners of our world. And comment, sharing your own thoughts on this question. If we discovered proof of intelligent life in Earth's oceans, how would it change our understanding of our place on this planet? The truth is, we live on a water world. We call it Earth, but more than 2/3 of it is covered by ocean. We've built our civilizations on the dry land, the exposed peaks of mountains that rise above the waves. But the real world, the larger world, is beneath the surface, and we're only now beginning to realize how little we know about it. Until next time, remember, the deepest mysteries on Earth aren't above us, they're below. And they've been there all along, waiting in the darkness, patient and undisturbed, for millions of years before we evolved the ability to finally look back